This is not a legend. This is the report of a soldier who saw the Nazi Werwolf program with his own eyes. What he wrote was never meant for the world to hear. Locked files, stamped pages, orders to stay silent. But the chains still rattle in the dark, and the truth refuses to stay buried. Subscribe now because what you'll hear next may never leave you. The winter of 1944 was not just cold, it was cruel. It froze rivers into stone and buried whole villages in silence. The snow came so heavy, it erased the roads, the fences, even the graves. All that remained was white emptiness that swallowed sound and memory alike. Our unit was small, just 6 men. 6 men with rifles, frostbitten fingers, and orders that made less sense the more we looked at them. The paper we carried wasn't SIT signed, it wasn't SIT stamped. It was only a half-blurred message. Hold the building. Do not radio, do not move, wait for instructions. No insignia, no commander's name, no reason given, just those 4 lines. We followed the coordinates scrawled in the corner, trudging through snow that reached our knees. By the time we saw the house, the day had already given up its light. It stood alone on the edge of the forest, a 2-story stone structure, its windows covered with blackout cloth nailed in place. The cloth moved faintly in the wind, like the building itself was breathing. An old clock hung above the doorway. The hands were frozen at midnight. The numbers had faded, but the crack across its face looked almost like a scar. "Looks like a school, Thomas," the medic muttered, pulling his scarf higher against the wind. "No children left here," Elia the scout whispered. His eyes stayed fixed on the building. "It feels wrong, like it's waiting for us." We circled the place once. There were no tracks in the snow, no footprints, no wagon marks, no smoke, no life, only stillness. Jonas, the munitions man, spat into the snow. "Empty," he said. "We'll freeze guarding nothing." But even as he said it, none of us really believed it. Sergeant Carell said nothing. His silence was heavier than any words. He only lifted his gloved hand and pointed at the door. The closer we stepped, the more I felt the weight of the place pressing down. The shutters tapped softly against stone, each knock echoing as if the house had its own heartbeat. My boots crunched in the snow, and I hated how loud it sounded, as if announcing us to someone already listening inside. Sergeant pushed the door open. It didn't resist. It didn't even creak like old wood should. Instead, it swung with a low groan, long and hollow, like a sigh. The smell met us instantly. Not the stale dust of an abandoned home, not even the rot of food left too long. This was sharp, bitter, chemical. The sting of iron and medicine, the kind of smell that clings inside hospitals or morgues. "Marek," the radio man muttered, "this isn't a house." No one answered him. Inside, the hall was bare, too bare. No chairs, no tables, no signs of anyone ever living here. Only rows of narrow iron cots pressed against the wall. Each had thick leather straps bolted into the frames. Some straps were frayed, others stained dark in places. The metal buckles gleamed faintly, too clean for an abandoned place. Jonas looked away quickly. Thomas, our medic, stared too long. His lips pressed into a thin line. "These aren't beds," he whispered. "They're restraints." I turned away, trying not to breathe too deep. The chemical tang made my throat itch. Sergeant kept moving forward, silent, his rifle ready. He did not stop to comment. He did not let us linger, but his jaw tightened, and I saw his eyes move over every cot as though he already knew what they meant. We passed through another room. Empty shelves, broken cabinets. More of that stinging odor. Papers scattered across the floor, their ink blurred by damp. I picked one up. It showed a sketch of a man's head. At least it started as a man's head. The jaw was stretched forward, teeth sharpened into points. The muscles of the face were drawn larger, pulled into strange shapes. The eyes were scratched out. I dropped the paper. My hands felt colder without the gloves. Marek whispered, "What kind of school is this?" "It's not a school," Tomas answered quietly. His voice cracked. "It's a workshop." Then it came, a sound from above. Not a crash. not a voice. A drag, long, slow, uneven, as though something heavy pulled itself across the floorboard. Then silence. Then again, drag, pause, drag. We froze. Every one of us held still. Even our breath. The house was not empty. Sergeant raised his fist and gave the signal. His face was pale, his jaw like iron. Slowly, one by one, we lifted our rifles and turned toward the stairs. The building watched us. That's how it felt. Every shadow in the corner, every crack in the wall, every sway of the blackout cloth over the windows, it all watched. We moved toward the staircase. Each step louder than it should have been. Each heartbeat louder than a gunshot. We didn't know it then, but by climbing those stairs, we weren't just following orders. We were walking straight into a secret that was never meant to be found. The staircase groaned under our boots. Each step seemed to echo louder than it should, like the whole building wanted to announce us. The air grew heavier as we climbed. It wasn't just dust, it wasn't just rot. It was sharper, stronger, the same chemical sting that had greeted us at the door. It burned the inside of the nose, like chlorine or strong alcohol, the kind of smell that doesn't fade, it stays. At the top of the stairs, we entered a long corridor. It was narrow, the kind where two men could barely pass shoulder to shoulder. Doors lined both sides. They were thick, heavy wooden doors with bolts, bars, and one thing that made my stomach turn: every lock was on the outside. Not doors for living, not rooms for families, not classrooms or offices. These were cells. Thomas, our medic, whispered, "Why lock from the outside?" Jonas, trying to sound brave, muttered, "To keep prisoners in." But none of us believed that. The smell was worse up here, bitter like burnt rubber mixed with blood. It clung to our throats. I thought of hospitals, but hospitals never smelled this wrong. Sergeant motioned us forward. We moved slowly, rifles raised. My hands shook so hard I had to grip the stock tighter to hide it. Some of the doors had scratches on them, deep grooves, carved into the wood, not made by knives, not by tools, but by hands or claws. Long, jagged lines, dragging down as if someone or something had been trying to dig its way out. Ilya, the scout, touched one of the scratches with his glove. He pulled his hand back quickly, like the wood itself burned. "This wasn't set done by prisoners," he whispered. We kept walking. The corridor was silent, but not empty. Every shadow seemed too deep. Every breath we took felt like it echoed off walls that had heard too much. Then we saw it, the last door at the far end. Unlike the others, it wasn't in total darkness. Faint yellow light leaked out through the cracks at the edges, a weak glow like an oil lamp left to die. Sergeant raised his hand and gave the signal. We stacked against the wall. My heart pounded so loud I thought they could hear it inside the room. Marek, the radio man, pressed his ear to the wood. "There ist his movement," he mouthed. Karel gave the order. Marek twisted the handle and kicked the door open. The room inside was small. The air was thick, sour, choking with the smell of sweat, rust, and something more, something feral, like the inside of a cage that hadn't been cleaned in years. Against the far wall, slumped but alive, was a man. Or at least, he had been a man once. He wore a torn hospital gown, dirty and ripped. His body was thin, bones jutting through pale skin stretched too tight. His hair hung over his face in clumps, wild and greasy. But when he looked up, every thought of man left my mind. His eyes caught the light, glowing faint, unnatural yellow. Not the reflection of a lantern, not human at all, predatory, hungry. His teeth were wrong, too sharp, too long, as though his mouth had been taught to pretend to be something it was never meant to be. The iron cuff still clamped around his ankle, a chain dragging as he shifted forward. He crawled one step toward us, slow, dragging one twisted leg behind him. Thomas froze. Jonas raised his rifle, whispering, "What the hell is that?" But Sergeant barked, "Hold." We stood there in silence, rifles trembling in our hands, watching as this figure in rags moved closer, dragging chain, dragging leg. And then, From the other rooms came a sound. Soft at first, then louder. Knocking, scratching, fists pounding weakly against the doors all around us. One, two, then many. The entire corridor came alive. We weren't set looking at just one. The others were still locked away, waiting. That was the moment I knew. Whatever this place was, it wasn't meant to hold prisoners. It was meant to hold experiments. And we had just stepped into the middle of them. The chained figure didn't move fast. That was what made it worse. Every scrape of the chain against the floor was deliberate, slow, patient, his twisted leg dragged like dead weight. Yet his eyes never left us, yellow, watching, measuring. We could hear every breath he took. They weren't steady human breaths, they were ragged, animal gulps of air. Each one carried a faint whistle like something broken inside his chest. We wanted to think of him as a man, but the longer we stared, the harder that was. His face twitched with small, unnatural jerks. His shoulders rose and fell like something was moving under the skin, crawling. His teeth caught the lantern light, too sharp, too long, a grin not meant for any man. Still, Sergeant Karelset's voice cut the air. "Hold your fire." It wasn't bravery, it was survival. We all knew firing now might wake the rest, because the others had already begun. From the doors lining the corridor came the noises. At first, a faint knock, then another, then scratching. Long, dry scratches that screamed through the wood, then pounding, weak fists first, then stronger, harder, like something throwing its whole weight against the doors. Dozens of them. All at once, the entire hallway shaking with the weight of it. The sound wrapped around us, pressing into our ears. Our bones, the air vibrated. My skin prickled with cold sweat. Mirek whispered, voice shaking, "They're all awake." Jonas cursed. Aya muttered something that sounded like a prayer. Thomas, our medic, gripped the strap of his rifle with white knuckles. His lips moved silently, and only when I leaned closer did I realize he was repeating the same phrase over and over. They were human, they were human, they were human. But no one believed it. Not anymore. The doors were wrong, we saw it now in the faint light. Locks on the outside, bolts thick as a man's wrist, hinges reinforced. The kind of locks meant not for security, but for containment. And every lock rattled with pressure from the other side. Ilya pointed to one door near the end. Deep gouges scarred the frame. Wood splintered outward. The door itself bent in the center, as though something had thrown itself again and again against it. Thomas hissed, "Claw marks." "They sit claw marks." "No," Jonas growled. "Those are nails." But in the dim light, we saw it. Some marks were wide, curved, not fingernails. Something thicker, something not meant for human hands. Then it happened. From one door came a voice, low, hoarse, a whisper in German. "Dosierung, dosierung." The word repeated, broken, strained. Thomas knew it before the rest of us. His face went white. "Dosage," he whispered. The pounding grew louder, stronger. The chain on the crawling figure clanged harder, faster. The whole corridor seemed alive now, filled with fists, claws, whispers, growls. We backed away step by step, rifles raised, eyes darting between every door, every shadow. The chained figure reached the edge of his room but did not cross it. He stayed just inside, his body crouched low, his mouth curled back in a snarl, watching us retreat. For one terrible second, all the sounds stopped. No knocking, no scratching, no whispering. Silence. The kind of silence that presses against your chest, waiting to explode. Sergeant raised his hand. His voice was a low growl. "Back, slowly. Don, sit, run." We obeyed. Each step toward the stairs felt like walking through a dream where the ground was ready to collapse. Our boots pressed too loud, the wood creaked too sharp, and still those yellow eyes followed us. Halfway down the stairs, the first crash came. A door upstairs slammed under a massive blow. Then, another. And another. The entire house shook. Dust falling from the beams. The pounding rolled through the floorboards, through the walls, through our bones. Jonas gritted his teeth. They kept breaking out. Sergeant didn't stop. His voice was flat, hard. Move now. We reached the first floor, rifles still trembling in our hands, our ears filled with the thunder from above. When we regrouped in the main hall, no one spoke. Our breath came in foggy bursts, the air thick with the weight of fear. Finally, Merrick broke the silence, his voice cracking. This isn't a mission. It's a trap. They sent us here to guard. He stopped. His throat worked like he couldn't finish the sentence. Sergeant's eyes burned cold as ice. He looked at us one by one, then down at the folded paper still tucked into his coat. This place, he said, voice low and certain, was never meant to be seen. The night came heavy and cruel. Snow piled against the walls outside, muting the forest. Inside, the air pressed down on us like a thick blanket, heavy with chemicals and dust and the sour tang of sweat. Every breath tasted wrong. Every corner of the building felt alive. We formed our watch, 2 men outside near the tree line, their shadows stretching across the snow under the moonlight. 2 inside, rifles pointed toward the staircase. 2 tried to rest, but there was no sleep, only closed eyes that still heard the pounding above. The sound never truly stopped. It came in waves, a slam of fists against wood, silence, then claws dragging down boards until splinters scattered on the floor. Sometimes it was soft, like scratching at the edge of hearing. Other times it was sudden, violent, so loud the doors shook in their frames. Each noise froze our bodies stiff. Thomas the medic sat near the fire, polishing his instruments again and again. His hands moved in circles, but his eyes never left the dark ceiling above. He whispered to himself. I leaned closer once and caught the words. He was repeating a prayer, not for us, not for survival, for the men behind the locked doors. Merrick fiddled with the radio even though Sergeant Carell had forbidden it. The static filled the room like an insect buzzing in the skull. Then it changed. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps again. None of us wanted to admit it sounded like a signal. Merrick turned white and switched it off, shoving the set under his coat as if hiding it could erase what he had heard. Jonas paced, boots heavy on the stone floor. He muttered without stopping. His words spilled like broken thoughts. Cages, wolves, monsters. He shook his head hard, but the muttering never ended. Ilya stared through the cracks in the boarded window. His breath fogged the glass, but he refused to move. After an hour, he whispered that something was moving between the trees. He swore he saw shapes, tall shapes, loping. They never came closer, but they never left either. He said they were waiting. The building groaned louder as the night deepened. The walls were not still. They swelled and cracked like something shifted inside them. Dust drifted down. A long beam overhead bent with a faint pop as though pressure pushed against it from within. None of us wanted to say what it felt like. The house itself was breathing. Then the whispers began. At first only one voice, a low broken mutter that drifted through the floorboards. Then another joined it. Then more, words in German, broken and repeated. Dosage, subject, phase. The sound carried like chants from a dark church. My skin crawled with every repetition. We sat frozen, listening, each syllable seeping into our bones. Thomas closed his eyes and pressed his hands against his ears. Merrick whispered that the words sounded rehearsed, like drills, like lessons. Sergeant Carell said nothing. He sat near the door, his cigarette glowing faint in the dark. His face stayed hard, but his hand trembled when he drew smoke. He told us once and only once, not a word of what we saw leaves this unit. Orders are clear. His voice was iron, but his eyes betrayed fear deeper than he would ever admit. Near midnight, the whisper stopped. Silence returned, but it was worse. Silence heavy with waiting. Then scratching began in the walls, not from upstairs, not from behind doors. From inside the walls around us, long dragging sounds. Scratches that circled the room like claws crawling inside the stone itself. Jonas pressed his ear to the wall. He swore he felt heat. He swore he felt breath. He jumped back, pale as death. None of us checked. The footsteps returned above us, slow at first, then fast. A run that thundered across the floorboards only to stop in an instant. Then silence. then chains rattling. Then a growl so deep the wood beneath our boots vibrated. Thomas whispered that it was not a sound of pain. It was hunger. The fire burned low. Shadows stretched across the walls like hands reaching. Each crack of the flames made us flinch. None of us dared add more wood. We sat in dim orange light, trapped between shadows and silence and the things above. Elia muttered that he saw movement again outside the window. Yellow glints between the trees. Eyes watching, they never blinked. They never left. Marek tried again to speak. His voice cracked. We are not guarding them. We are trapped here with them. His words died in the air like ash. The hours crawled. Our eyes burned. Sweat froze against our backs. Every creak, every shift of air made us clutch our rifles tighter. When dawn came, it gave no comfort. Pale light leaked through the cracks of the shutters, but the scratching never stopped. It had grown steady through the night, rhythmic, like claws marking time. We had survived the first night, but survival did not feel like victory. It felt like a sentence. The pale light of dawn had barely touched the frozen windows when the pounding grew louder again. We had made it through one night, but none of us were fooled. The walls had carried whispers until morning, the scratches never stopped, and our nerves were worn thin. Every man's face was drawn, gray, hollow. We rotated the watch. Thomas rubbed his swollen eyes and muttered that he would rather march into a trench than stay here another hour. Jonas only spat in the snow and said nothing. Then it came. The sound was not like before. It was not the soft scratching or the steady knocking we had grown used to. This was violent, a single thunderous slam from above that shook the whole building. Dust rained from the beams. The lantern rattled against the wall. We froze, rifles raised, eyes wide. Another slam followed. Louder. Wood cracked sharp. A door upstairs was giving way. Sergeant Carell barked orders, his voice low but sharp. Upstairs now. Move. We obeyed, hearts hammering, boots pounding the stairs louder than we wanted. Every step felt like walking into a storm. The corridor was chaos. One door shook with each blow from the inside. The iron bolts rattled. The frame splintered at the edges. With every impact, the door bent outward, wood bowing as if it was only paper. Jonas cursed. It is coming through. The pounding stopped. Silence returned. For a moment, none of us moved. Rifles pointed at the door. My breath came shallow, loud in the stillness. Then the door slammed again. A roar exploded behind it, deep, inhuman. The sound carried through our bones. It was not the cry of a starving prisoner. It was the roar of something that hated being contained. The entire corridor vibrated. The chained man in the open room stirred. His yellow eyes glowed brighter. His twisted mouth pulled into a grin. He dragged his chain across the floor, and the sound rang like a cruel bell. Sergeant Carell stepped forward, jaw hard. He pressed his hand against the shaking door. Splinters dug into his glove. He held it there as if daring the thing inside to break through. Then he pulled back slowly and turned to us. "We cannot let that door open," he said. His voice was flat, but his eyes betrayed what we all knew. If it opened, we would not survive the day. Thomas muttered, "Why are we even here? Why guard this? Why us?" No one answered. The door slammed again. Wood cracked sharp like bones breaking. The top hinge tore slightly from the frame. A sliver of light appeared, then vanished as the door pressed back. We aimed our rifles. My finger trembled on the trigger. Jonas whispered, "Shoot it now, before it gets out." Sergeant Fitz's voice cut like steel. "No, not until we see it." The pounding stopped once more, silence heavier than death. Then came a sound worse than the roaring. Breathing, heavy, slow, wet, pressing against the gap in the splintered frame. And a hand. It pushed through the crack. Pale, stretched skin, fingers long, nails black and curved into points. They scraped against the wood, curling like claws, testing the air. Thomas choked out, "That is no man Sid's hand." The fingers flexed, scraping the door, leaving deep lines in the wood, then they withdrew. The breathing faded. The pounding stopped. The silence stretched until it felt endless. None of us lowered our rifles. None of us moved. Finally, Sergeant spoke, voice low. We hold position. No one opens this door. We wait for orders. Jonas snapped. Orders? Orders from who? They left us here to die. Sergeant turned his gaze on him. For a second it looked like he might strike him, but instead he just said, we hold. The corridor stayed silent after that, but we knew the silence was only waiting. The thing behind the door was still there. It had tested the frame, tested us, and chosen to bide its time. As we stepped back down the stairs, the chained man laughed, a low, broken laugh that was half growl, half mockery. The sound followed us all the way to the hall below. We had survived another test, but the truth had settled deep inside. The locks would not hold forever. The day crawled forward like a wounded animal. The pale light through the shutters brought no warmth. It only showed how worn and hollow we had become. Our faces were gray, our eyes bloodshot, our hands always shaking around our rifles. We had food left, but only scraps, hard bread that cracked our teeth, tins of meat that smelled metallic. We chewed in silence, the taste mixing with the stench of chemicals that never left the building. Every bite felt like it might be our last. The air was worse by daylight. Without the cover of night, it felt more exposed, more open, as if the building itself wanted us to see what it really was. The walls oozed damp streaks down the stone. Rust marked the hinges of every door. Black stains spread on the floors near the cots. No one said what they looked like. We all knew. Jonas broke first. He slammed his rifle against the wall and shouted, "This is not guarding, this is waiting to die." His voice echoed through the hall, bouncing off the walls like another man mocking us. Sergeant Carell rose, slow and calm, and pressed Jonas back with one hand. His voice was low but sharp. "Control yourself. Noise wakes them." Jonas stared at him with wild eyes. "They are already awake." No one argued, because it was true. The pounding upstairs returned in bursts. Not steady this time. Sudden violent slams against random doors. Sometimes it came from one side, sometimes the other, sometimes two doors at once. It was as if they knew we were listening, as if they were taunting us. Then came the voices again. Not whispers this time, louder, broken German words shouted and repeated. Subject, dosage, hunger. The words rose and fell like chants. Thomas pressed his hands over his ears and rocked back and forth. His lips moved as he repeated, "They were men once. They were men once." Marek sat with the radio again. He turned the dial over and over until he found a signal. Static roared, then faint words pushed through. Not English, not Russian, not German, we understood. Something softer, stranger. He dropped the set and stared at it with terror. "They are speaking through it," he whispered. "Not men. Them." We all moved back from the radio as if it had become infected. Ilya refused to come inside. He stayed near the window, staring out into the tree line. He whispered that he saw them again. Shapes moving low and fast between the trees. Not men, not wolves. Something in between. Yellow glints flashing in the dark. He said they circled the house all night and all day, waiting for the moment the locks upstairs failed. The fear was worse than hunger, worse than cold. It gnawed through us. Every noise made us twitch. Every shadow made us aim. We started to doubt each other. When Jonas coughed too hard, Marek pointed his rifle at him and hissed, "Check his eyes." Jonas swore at him, but I saw the truth. We were all watching each other now, wondering if one of us would change like the chained man in the room. Sergeant saw it too. He gathered us near the cold fireplace and spoke. His words were short, iron, but we heard the tremor beneath them. "You will not speak of turning. You will not speak of infection. We are soldiers. We hold this post until orders release us." But his hands shook as he spoke. His cigarette burned down to the filter. His eyes darted toward the stairs as if he expected the ceiling to crash in any moment. That afternoon, the building itself betrayed us again. A slam so heavy shook the entire second floor. Dust poured down from the beams. Boards cracked overhead. For a moment we thought the whole ceiling might collapse. The chained man in his room began to laugh again. That broken laugh. Guttural, low. His yellow eyes glowed through the dark as his chain scraped across stone. Jonas shouted, "Enough. We burn it now." He grabbed a lantern and staggered toward the stairs. Sergeant knocked it from his hand before he could take the first step. Oil splashed across the floor. The smell filled the hall. Sergeant leaned close to his face. His voice was calm but dangerous. "You burn this place before the order comes, and you die before the flames rise." Jonas spat at his boots, but he backed down. The silence that followed was worse than the argument. We sat in it like prisoners ourselves, each man holding his rifle tighter, each man listening to the claws that never stopped scratching above. By nightfall, none of us spoke. We had become ghosts with guns waiting for a door to break and end us. We were not guards anymore. We were captives, and the cage we were in was not built for us. The second night came heavier than the first. None of us had slept. Our bodies shook with exhaustion, but our eyes refused to close. The air inside the building felt thicker, fouler. Every corner of the hall was soaked in the stench of chemicals and rust. The scratching from upstairs never stopped. It had grown louder, more furious. The pounding returned at random, not steady, not even desperate. Just sudden bursts of violence, as if the things inside the rooms wanted us to know they could break free whenever they chose. Sergeant Carell tried to keep order. He gave watch rotations, barked at men to stay calm, forced us to sit in silence. But his voice was thinner now. His iron command cracked at the edges. We all heard it. It was near midnight when the house itself gave the first true warning. A door upstairs slammed so hard, the bolts rattled loose. The sound was not like before. It was sharper, louder. The frame splintered. Dust fell from the ceiling in thick clouds. We froze. All eyes on the staircase, every rifle raised. My heart pounded so hard it made my vision blur. Then it happened again. A second slam, louder. The frame cracked. Wood broke with a sickening snap. Jonas whispered, "It is coming through. This time it is coming through." No one told him to be quiet. No one had to. We all knew. The next blow shattered the top hinge. The sound rang through the house like cannon fire. Splinters sprayed across the corridor. A howl followed. Not human, not animal. Something in between. It shook the air, rattled my chest, froze my blood. Sergeant shouted, "Positions." His voice was steady, but his hands shook as he pointed. We formed a line at the base of the stairs, rifles aimed upward. The fourth slam tore the door free. The sound was thunder. The wooden panel flew outward and crashed against the wall. For 1 second, the corridor above filled with dust and silence. Then it came through. The first thing I saw were eyes, yellow, burning. Then the shape followed. Bent, twisted, shoulders too broad, arms too long. Chains still clamped to its wrists, dragging like claws against the floor. Its face caught the lantern light, and I felt my stomach turn, half man, half wolf. Skin stretched, jaw lengthened, teeth jutting sharp like broken glass. It dropped low and let out a roar that split the silence. Jonas fired first. The shot cracked the air and echoed down the hall. The bullet hit its chest. The thing staggered back, but only for a moment. Then it lunged. The chain whipped across the boards as it charged. Sergeant shouted, "Hold! Fire!" We opened fire. The corridor lit with muzzle flashes. Bullets struck, tearing into flesh. Blood sprayed, but it did not fall. It kept coming. The beast crashed down the stairs, each step groaning under its weight. It moved fast, too fast. Its claws scraped sparks from the wood. Jonas screamed as it leapt, chains swinging. He fired point blank. The round tore through its shoulder. The beast roared and slammed him against the wall with a force that cracked bone. Blood sprayed across the boards. Jonas's scream cut off in an instant. We fired again and again. Smoke filled the hall. The air stank of gunpowder and blood. The creature staggered but did not stop. Its yellow eyes burned through the haze. Thomas shouted prayers as he fired, each shot trembling. Merrick fumbled with his rifle. his hands shaking so badly he dropped his magazine. Ilya dragged him back, screaming for him to reload. The beast slashed at the barricade we had built with cabinets and cots, wood splintered under its claws. The chains tore grooves across the floor. Each roar shook the hall. Finally, Sergeant Carell stepped forward. He raised his pistol, eyes locked on the beast, and fired 3 shots straight into its head. The roars cut short. The beast stumbled, chains clattering. For one moment, it stood swaying in the lantern light, its mouth hanging open, blood pouring dark down its chest. Then it collapsed in a heap at the base of the stairs. The hall fell silent. Our ears rang with the echo of shots. Smoke hung heavy, making us cough. Jonas lay broken against the wall. His chest barely moved. Blood pooled under him. His rifle lay bent beside him. Thomas dropped to his knees and grabbed his kit. He pressed cloth to the wounds, but his hands shook too hard. He whispered over and over, "I cannot stop it. I cannot stop it." The beast lay still, but even dead, it was not human. The smell was worse than rot. Its skin stretched wrong, its mouth frozen in a snarl. Chains clinked softly as its body settled. We stared in silence, too afraid to believe it was over. Then came the sound we dreaded most. From upstairs, behind every other locked door, the pounding began. Louder, harder, all at once. The building shook under the weight of fists and claws and roars. The other doors would not hold for long. Sergeant Carell Sitt's voice cut through the noise. "Back, barricade the stairs. Move." We obeyed, dragging cabinets, shelves, anything we could lift. The pounding above grew louder. The whole ceiling groaned. As we worked, I looked once more at the fallen beast. Its eyes still glowed faint yellow in the dim light. Faint, but not gone. That was the moment I knew. Killing one would never be enough. The barricade at the bottom of the stairs was thick. Cabinets, broken cots, tables stacked one over another. Nails hammered into weak wood. It looked strong to our eyes, but deep down we knew it was only a wall of desperation. The pounding above grew worse. Every locked door on the second floor shook with force. Bolts rattled, hinges screamed. Dust rained down in clouds, the air filled with the rhythm of fists and claws. It sounded like drums before battle. Sergeant Carell barked orders as we shoved the last cabinet in place. "Hold this line. We do not break." His voice was iron, but his eyes showed the truth. He was not sure. None of us were. The first impact came fast. The barricade shook. Boards snapped. The whole wall groaned under weight. We pressed our shoulders against it, rifles aimed, waiting for the first shadow. Then came another blow. Stronger. The barricade shuddered. A leg of a table cracked down the middle. Chains rattled overhead. Roars rolled through the ceiling. Thomas clutched his cross and prayed. Marek whispered curses under his breath. Ilya's hands trembled on his rifle. We were not soldiers anymore. We were prey in a trap. The third impact broke through. Splinters rained down. A claw burst through the wood. Black nails curled into the air, scraping, pulling, then another, then 2 more. The barricade shook like a living thing. And then it gave. Wood split, furniture toppled, cabinets crashed to the floor. The roar that followed drowned every other sound. The first creature lunged through the wreckage. Chains hung loose from its arms. Its jaw was stretched wide, teeth dripping with saliva. Yellow eyes burned like fire. We fired all at once. The hallway lit with muzzle flashes. The bullets tore through its chest. Blood sprayed across the walls, but it did not fall. It leapt into us, claws swiping, chains whipping. Ilya screamed as it struck his shoulder. Blood poured down his arm. Marek tried to pull him back, but the second beast slammed through the gap before he could. Its body was bigger, heavier. Its roar shook the room. We stumbled backward, firing blind, ears ringing. Smoke filled the hall. The smell of iron and gunpowder mixed with something worse, something rotten and chemical. Jonas was already gone. Ilya collapsed bleeding. Thomas tried to drag him, but claws caught his back. He screamed until the sound broke into silence. Sergeant Carell stood his ground. His pistol snapped with each shot. he shouted for us to hold. His voice rose above the chaos like steel. Back, hold the line. We fell back into the main hall. The fire lanterns flickered against the walls, shadows stretching monstrous. The beasts came through one after another, chains dragging, eyes glowing, roars filling every corner. Bullets slowed them but never stopped them. Flesh tore but still they moved. Teeth snapped, claws struck, blood sprayed across stone. Merrick dropped his rifle and grabbed a grenade. His hands shook but he pulled the pin. For all of us, he whispered. He rushed forward and vanished in a blast that tore the hall in two. The smoke choked us. The beasts howled, but when it cleared, more still stood. Sergeant grabbed me by the collar and dragged me toward the back hall. Move, now. His voice was raw, desperate. We stumbled through a broken doorway and slammed it shut behind us. The hinges bent. The wood shook. Roars thundered on the other side. We ran through the narrow corridor, past more locked doors with numbers painted in black. I caught glimpses through the tiny windows, faces, twisted faces staring out. Some pressed their jaws against the glass. Some whispered, some smiled. We reached the cellar door and tore it open. The steps led down into damp black. The air was cold, wet, heavy with rot. We stumbled into the cellar, boots splashing through puddles. Pipes rattled overhead. The sound of claws hammered the door behind us. Each strike bent the wood. Each blow sent cracks crawling across it. Sergeant shoved me toward a far wall. Help me. We pressed against the stone until it shifted. A hidden passage yawned open. A black tunnel waiting. We staggered inside. The door burst behind us as we slipped into the tunnel. The roar that followed shook the stone. The sound of claws scraped closer. We ran. The tunnel was narrow, pressing our shoulders. Water dripped down the walls. Our breath came ragged, echoing off stone. Behind us, claws struck. Chains rattled. The sound grew closer with every step. We reached a junction. One path narrow, one wide. Sergeant chose wide. We followed. My lungs burned. My vision blurred. The roar behind us grew louder. At last we found a ladder. A square of weak light glowed above. Sergeant climbed first. He shoved the hatch open. Cold night air spilled in. Pines swayed overhead. The forest waited. He pulled me through next. The snow crunched under my boots. Smoke from the burning house rose in the distance, curling black against the sky. The fire had taken the roof. Sparks drifted like ash stars. Sergeant pulled the hatch closed behind us. For a moment the night was still, only our breath, ragged and shallow. Then the howls began, not from the house, from the trees. Dozens of voices rose, long, sharp, filled with hunger. Yellow eyes blinked between the trunks. Shapes moved low and fast, circling us. Sergeant shoved a slip of paper into my chest. His eyes locked on mine. You live, you tell it. Before I could answer, he turned, rifle raised, and stepped toward the tree line. I clutched the paper against my chest. My hands shook. My breath burned in the frozen air. The howls closed in. That night did not end. It became a blur of gunfire and roars and blood. I ran until the forest swallowed me whole. I never saw Sergeant again, but I still carry his words. This was not a legend. This was not rumor. This was the truth. The Nazi werewolf program was real, and I saw it with my own eyes. If you are still listening, remember this. The doors were locked from the outside. The voices in the walls were real, and what we saw in 1944 was not a legend. Some truths never make it into history books. They are buried, stamped, hidden, but they do not die. The werewolf program was one of those truths. I carried the order. I carried the memory. Now I have carried it to you. Do not forget what you heard. Do not let silence bury it again. Subscribe for more stories they tried to erase. And tell me in the comments, would you have stood your ground in that hall, or would you have run into the dark?